I have always been interested in learning how successful people accomplish what they accomplished. Their habits, routines, ways of seeing the world, thinking, and so on. And sure, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs are part of my research, but they are not the end-all be-all. There are a few exceptional people that completely surpass anything accomplished, thought of, and expected by any human being in the past. And that's how Leonardo da Vinci enters into my world. So while reading about him, it occurred to me, why don't I try to model his daily routine and see if I can tap into his genius and how his mind worked? At least a tiny little bit would be pretty cool. I know he was very well known for his polyphasic sleeping routine, and actually Nathaniel Drew has a pretty cool video about it which I recommend, but that's not what I'm most interested about. I am fascinated by his ability to paint, to think deeply, to invent, to study and to contemplate. Basically, I am most interested about how he tapped into his full potential and became the first and perhaps the most important Renaissance man in the history of the world. I am gonna be basing my daily routine and habits on a book called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. It is an amazing book that takes the time to study the routines and habits of da Vinci and distill them into 7 principles, written in Italy to keep it artistic. They are curiosità, demonstrazione, sensazione, arte scienza, corporalità, and connessione. I don't speak Italian. This guy was not just an excellent painter, but he also made tons of discoveries in fields like anatomy, botany, engineering, geology, and physics. And if I have to guess, his main driver was his intense curiosity. He was probably asking questions about everything and investigating different subjects deeply. So to bring the principle of curiosity to life, I'll be writing down 100 questions that I would like to answer, and of course, try to find an answer. So I've written 50 questions so far and it took me around 10 minutes. It is definitely a pretty cool exercise and I feel a sense of curiosity arising for sure. Okay, so let's finish them.
2 hours later.
So I'm done and it was harder than I expected. After the 60th question or so, I just ran out of questions to ask. So to continue, I had to, in a very weird way, to open up and discover things that I thought I knew, but realized I had zero clue about. I wrote a question, for example, that said, what is mind? Like really, where is it? What shape does it have? And so on. Leonardo was a lover of experience, not beliefs. When he found fossils while walking on the mountains of Lombardy, he advanced an important critique against the prevailing view that these were deposits of a biblical flood. When he wanted to learn about anatomy, he just dissected 30 human bodies and countless animal corpses, and again, his discoveries went against the current paradigm. He went with his experience, not authority or belief, and actually, he referred to himself as a disciple of experience. So to ground this principle, each night I will go through my mistakes and see how I can improve on them. I have noticed that I go through life making the same mistakes over and over again, and I should not be doing that. If my experience tells me that something is wrong, I should change them, and that's the objective of this exercise. As I said before, I make a lot of mistakes every day, and this exercise provides me a way to reflect on them and improve them. One example that I found is if I sleep more than 30 minutes in my naps, my whole day goes to shit. For Leonardo, the senses were the keys to open the door of existence. They are actually the way in which we know and come into contact with reality. That's why he worked hard on them, training them and becoming more and more perceptive. And that's probably the reason why he was such a great painter, and for my surprise, a great musician. Here's a quote I love from him. The average human looks without seeing, listens without hearing, touches without feeling, eats without tasting, moves without physical awareness, inhales without awareness of fragrance, and talks without thinking. So to start practicing and developing my senses, I'll be painting something a day and listening to classical music without any distractions. So I want to take on this practice because I believe that painting something every day will help me improve my seeing skills and polish my perceptions in some way. As a disclaimer, I'm a horrible painter and drawer, and actually art was my least favorite subject in primary and high school. But let's see if I can spark that interest once and for all. I'll be drawing something very simple like a bottle or a plant, because I don't have the time nor the instruments to do something more complicated. But let's see how it goes. So I've done a few drawings by now and I definitely saw some improvements. Perhaps not much on the painting themselves, but on the quality of my perceiving. I've realized that by the mere fact of trying to recreate something on a piece of paper, it forces me to look deeper into the details of the object. The shadows, how its lines create a sense of depth, and much more. In a way, I see things that I didn't see before. It is definitely not like I have a special vision now or something similar, but I can see how becoming a better painter, my vision can improve, but not in a physical way. It's more on the lines that I become more aware of what takes place on the object, or something like that. I do listen to music daily when I'm working or doing some chores, but it's not often that I just sit down and exclusively listen to classical music. Thinking about it, I've never done it. So the idea with this exercise is the same as the painting one, but with different senses. Instead of working on my vision, I'll be working on my hearing abilities. For it, I'll be listening to Albert Schweitzer's interpretation of Bach, which was recommended by one of my favorite writers, Douglas Hofstadter. Let's get it going. After doing this daily, I can tell that there's a world of difference between listening to music while doing other stuff and just attentively listen to a whole album. The amount of nuance and emotion that can be picked up with focused listening is literally overwhelming. And Bach, dude, he was amazing. The way he creates tension, resolves harmonies, and plays around with different emotions is just outstanding for me. I'll leave the Spotify link below with the album. So definitely this is a practice or habit that I want to incorporate as a weekly, if not daily activity. I felt it was like a nice combination between the relaxing aspects of meditation and the emotional aspects of watching a movie. 100% recommended for sure. It is very well known to science that the brain can be divided into two hemispheres, the left and the right. The left hemisphere is in charge of logical processes and analytical thinking, while the right hemisphere processes imaginative, big picture thinking. In other words, the left has to do more with science and logic, while the right is more related to art and imagination. Nowadays, people specialize in either science or art, but Leonardo was different. He was a master painter and a brilliant engineer and scientist. He used and perfected his left and right hemisphere to become a whole brain thinker, and from what he says, that's how his work was so innovative and different. So to make this principle come alive, I'll be studying science and reading literature. This exercise intent is to develop and work on both my left and my right hemispheres. For that, I'll be reading a book called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry in my Kindle and Rayuela by Cortázar. I am gonna be reading this one in Spanish because it's in my native language and I usually never do that. After reading both literature and science regularly, it was interesting to notice how different these really are and how my mind engages with them in a completely different way. I think I could even start feeling using different parts of my brain, but I was probably imagining that part. Anyways, doing this, it became more apparent how both logic and emotion exist in two separate domains and worlds. There are no proofs and laws in literature, and at the same time there's no love and purpose in science. It is difficult for me to see in a very clear way benefits of doing this, but it's not like I was expected to become a whole brain thinker in a few days or something like that. But I can see how this can be possible on a subconscious level. Anyways, it was pretty fun to read both books. We might imagine that Da Vinci was kind of like a scientific and artistic nerd, but that seems far from the truth. Historians say that he had an extraordinary physical ability that complemented his intellectual and artistic genius. And lots of scholars suggested too that Da Vinci's passion for anatomy was just a reflection of his great physique. He was also known to be ambidextrous, so to recreate his routine, I'll be brushing my teeth and eating with different hands and stretching every day. I do weightlifting already, so it didn't make sense to include this in the video. But a thing I don't do often, not to say never, is stretching. So each morning after waking up, I'll be doing 5 to 10 minutes of stretching a day. Combined with this, I'll be brushing my teeth and eating with different hands. I can definitely see how this can end up with injuries all over my mouth. We are in day 6 and the result of the experiment was pretty cool. In regards to stretching, I can feel my body less tense and more relaxed. Now, with the ambidextrous thing, it was very hard. Thankfully, I didn't end up with a knife in my palate, but I realized how little control I have with my left hand. Each day gets easier for sure, but it's not like a piece of cake. I think the exercises were good though, because they made me polish the control of my whole body, which could have some hidden benefits that I can be missing right now. If you're into Zen and spirituality, you're probably gonna like this. I was pleasantly surprised when I read a quote from Da Vinci that was pretty similar to some Buddhist insights. He says, "Nothing has no center, and its boundaries are nothingness. Among the great things which are to be found among us, the being of nothingness is the greatest." In Nagarjuna, a very ancient Buddhist philosopher said that since all is empty or nothing, all is possible. It is clear to me that he's articulating insights that are at the core of much ancient wisdom. So to pay tribute to this aspect of his genius, I'll be contemplating the nature of reality. This is, in my opinion, the obscurest aspect of Da Vinci's routine. It is not something practical that I can implement right away, but it's more of an intense contemplation. So the intention is to ask what is reality and try to grasp something new. Let's see how it goes. After days of contemplating daily, I'm in the same place where I started, but probably with much more doubt. I realized that I don't perceive reality directly, meaning that the only way I come in contact with this is through my senses. But what is behind the senses? What is being? What is the nature of being when it's not perceived? And I've realized that anything I can imagine that's behind the senses, it's not it, because imagination is in a way perceiving with the mind. So yeah, that's where I'm at. This was definitely the hardest aspect of Da Vinci's principles to implement and see a benefit of some kind. So after 7 days of doing the Da Vinci routine, I can say that it was very beneficial. I'm not sure if I'll be able to maintain it in the future, but I will for sure do some of them here and there, like listening to music, stretching and reading science and literature. And I cannot claim that I've tapped into Da Vinci's genius with these practices or anything close, but I can see where he was coming from. Most people work on their careers or bodies or hobbies, but it's very hard to find the ones that understand their lives in a holistic way. Da Vinci was not just focused on one aspect of his life, but in each and every one of them. He worked very hard to be a great painter, but at the same time he was an excellent inventor. But he never forgot his health and physique. And by working daily and diligently on every aspect of his life, he reached his full potential in a way that very few people could. So if you ask me if I would recommend giving his routine a try, I would 100%. Buying the book How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci will be very helpful too. I'll leave the link in the comments and description so you can buy it. So this is it. Thank you very much for sticking with me. Click here and subscribe if you want to watch more videos like this. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and here's a video you'll probably like too.